Have you ever needed to pivot what you were doing, your strategy or anything, or have you just pretty much stayed course?
Say something that has really helped the quality of my crops has been my lesson of mesh trays versus slotted trays. Now, my opinion could be controversial. Other growers that are way bigger than me and maybe they have everything super dialed in. But for me and my hot, humid climate, I really have to manage how much water is going into my trays. In the beginning stages, I would say one of my biggest struggles, even before getting the dehumidifier, like I mentioned, was that my crops were coming out wet. They were wet, and I didn't like that. I was like, that's not right." Then it became a situation where I would reduce the amount of water, but the water distribution wasn't good enough, so then I would have wilting crops. They start to wilt on the edges too
Yeah.
much, and then sometimes, depending on what variety it is, they don't bounce back as well as maybe some other ones would if
Yeah.
they just got a little dry. Our favorite arugula/argula is definitely one of those crops where a mesh tray is going to be way more to your advantage. I started experimenting with all of my trays during the hot, humid summers here, able to cut down the amount of water that I was like watering each tray almost half of what I was doing previous to that. So that was a pivot I had to make. Once I discovered that my crops would tolerate the lesser amount of water and they wouldn't wilt or faint, I call it fainting. They
Painting.
start fainting on me. Then I was like, wow, this is really working. And it's keeping my humidity levels down or helping me control it better. And my crops were coming out drier. It was just a win win overall. So for me, that was a huge win/experiment. And then once I discovered it, I was like, give me some more of those mesh trays
Yes.
because I need them. So now, aside from sunflowers and peas, I pretty much grow everything in mesh.
If I had to completely start over, I would buy mesh trays mostly. I wouldn't do them for peas and sunflowers, the really rootier crops, but all the other crops do pretty well in them. Probably not wheatgrass, just because they get really rooty down there, right? Everything else I would do in mesh trays because it's more even distributing. Plus, we're getting ready to look at automatic watering. So I think you're going to get much better watering when you're doing the flood and drain kind of setup or however we do it. Definitely would recommend mesh trays to start with. They're easier, they're lighter to mess with too, because they're just that much lighter with bootstrap. So I definitely 100% recommend getting the mesh trays to start out 99% of your crops.
For me personally, with the type of scrubbing brush that I'm using to clean my trays, I feel like it's easier to get a mesh tray clean than it is the slotted. The only reason is the grooves in
Yeah.
the slotted, little
Well, there's
bits
so
of
many little
soil.
holes, right? It's a little harder for everything to go through.
Yeah, but the soil almost gets packed in those little
Yeah.
grooves that are in that slotted tray.
Yep.
You use more elbow grease and
We
use
don't want that.
you would put enough elbow grease cleaning trays.
Side benefit, the crops grow really well and they're easier to clean.
In my opinion.
In our opinion, I would agree with you in that opinion.
Oh,
So,
okay, awesome. That's
yes. Because when you scrub them, everything just kind of falls through rather than it gets bogged up in the corner or, like you said, in the grooves. If anybody's got trays, they come with grooves through them like racing tracks. The mesh ones don't have that because it's mesh all the way through them. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. So, awesome pivot.